so difficult to come after Maggie. Maggie, are you still here? Yeah, you know, I used to say always that world needs more Canada, and now I think I have to say world needs more Maggie. Wonderful. Thank you once again what you do. Now, I tried to do this, what I had to say to you a little bit faster so that we have time for conversation. If you want to take a look at some of the pictures I show, the easiest way to do that is to join me in Twitter, and I'm going to post this after the morning in Twitter so that you can take a look. I guess that I was told, and I saw in the social media, that you have been talking about PISA as well here, that you had a debate. And you know, I'm going to talk about big data a little bit, or data in general. And I often hear people saying that, you know, big data is bad and we need something else, or we don't need data at all. Sometimes, I don't know what your debate was yesterday here, but people say that PISA, that is the OECD PISA, that is often considered as an example of big data in education, is bad, and we should do it away and just keep on doing things in a normal way. But what I tried to tell you this morning is that I think as educators, as people who work with teachers and care about what teachers do, my opinion is that the best way to cope and deal with this new situation, with the emerging data and information and measurements and all those things, is probably not to resist it, to say that we don't want to do this, we don't want to go there. I think what we need as educators is a smarter narrative. We need to find a way how to talk about these things so that we are able to offer an alternative. So for me, the question is not really whether we should do PISA or any measurements or not. The question is, what is the best thing we need to make sure that we are moving ahead? Now, if you look at many other areas of life that are equally important than education, sports, for example, so sports is full of big data now. The football teams and national teams win championships because they use big data. They use data to analyze what they do. There's a concept, I spoke with Andy Hargreaves yesterday about football and big data. There's a concept now in football called expected goal. That because of all the data that they use in the football teams, they can basically they can predict when the team is going to score a goal. So you can go kitchen and have a beer and lunch, and then come back when the most likely period of game will be there, so that you can see the goal. So it's everywhere. All the professional team sports are relying on big data. Sometimes teams are losing, not winning championships, because they ignore the other part, the other side of the data, and they rely too much on analytics and numbers. The world's financial business in Wall Street and elsewhere is run by big data. It's not run by people anymore. Just take Goldman Sachs, for example. 15 years ago, Goldman Sachs used to have 600 women and men doing financial calculations and predictions. Now they have 2. Everything else is done by machines. 1/3 of the Goldman Sachs staff are engineers. So it's smart machines that are doing, this part of the economy. Then we have Google. People say that Google knows you better than yourself or your mother because of the big data. You sometimes probably wonder why the commercials of your favorite shoes or something else appears on the website that you're using to read the news. It's all about the big data. So big data is everywhere. So we cannot escape that. And now, of course, the question is that what should we do as educators? And what is the big data doing in education? Just to give you the definitions for those who are not very familiar with these concepts, big data basically means a massive, huge amount of data that is collected and manipulated, processed, that is so huge that we need big machines to do that thing. So big data has been around for the last 15 or 20 years. Then we have things like data mining. Data mining is basically something that you do when you have these huge masses of data and you use machines and algorithms to see whether there are some type of relationships or connections between these data points and items, whether some events are related to others or not. And then it gives you normally correlations or relationships about things that happen. I'll get back to you with this a little bit later. Then we have the learning analytics. This is a new field in the education data science that is providing answers to the questions like, what is the best way that this particular student will graduate or pass the course or do something else? Again, based on the data that has been collected in a number of ways. So the question for all of us is that, can big data really make education smarter? Is it possible? David was referring to iPads and the edtech companies that are doing this thing. I'm going to show you a 1-minute clip that is done by one of those leading big edutech or technology companies. And look at their promise, what they promise to do with the technology and big data. And I want you to think about this a little bit, and then I'm going to give you just 30 seconds to turn to somebody next to you and say what you think. Whether you think that this is something that will have anything to do with our work. So take a look.
Every 26 seconds, a student in America drops out of school, and more than 1,700 high schools across the country have a dropout rate above 40%. The sad irony is that most estimates predict that there will be more than 120 million highly skilled jobs in the U.S. by 2020. But American students will be qualified to fill less than half of those positions. These numbers can only spell disaster. But what if teachers had a more sophisticated way to monitor student progress? Education technology companies are now using big data analytics to give teachers a new tool to ensure success. Imagine a 10th grader incorrectly fills in the bubble for 6 apples, reevaluates, and then changes his answer to 12 bananas. We can now track the student's odds of flubbing this kind of question in the future and identify the flawed logic that caused the moment of doubt. Dozens of startups are using personalized testing to create detailed profiles for individual students, gathering roughly 10 million data points for every child. Arizona State University recently implemented a data analytics system that increased passing rates by 10%, while cutting dropout rates in half. These systems can also suggest exercises to make it easier for students to learn and hone new skills. Early adopters, like the Delaware Board of Education, reported an immediate 10% increase in both reading proficiency and math performance. And now more than 10,000 schools have integrated data collection into the classroom, which will soon help us answer some of the big questions. Many teachers resisted technology for decades because it often amounted to more work with unknown results. But new systems can provide analysis in real time, and more than 87% of teachers surveyed today believe that analytics can be a powerful instruction tool in the classroom. Big data is no longer just a measuring stick. It is allowing us to climb inside the minds of students to see not just what they learn, but how they learn best. Policymakers, teachers, and technology experts now agree that analytics are ready to tackle the problem. Will it be the catalyst that pushes American schools into the 21st century?
Okay, turn to somebody who is sitting next to you and just half a minute tell your kind of a first thought that you have. No, take it seriously. It's like Barack Obama was saying in the election that don't boo, vote. Okay, now listen. Now, when you think about this, if you still think that this is not going to happen in my watch, just think about the same question in a way that you receive a phone call from your minister or somebody else who has power to influence funding and school reforms. One day you get a phone call and say that, listen, there's some people are coming to show what they can do to help to increase the graduation rates and reduce the dropout rates. And I want your opinion on this. And you're going to show a presentation something like this and data. What would you say? If you say boo, or if you say it's a bad idea and that's it, this technology will take over, for sure. So that's why I think we need a smarter narrative. We need to think about this much harder than we probably have done so far, because this is going to be a powerful thing in the future everywhere in the world, this type of promise. It's already, as you see, it's already happening in around the world. So let's see what So let's see what we can do. You know, another example of the big data in education is what the OECD is doing. OECD is doing a lot of good things and important things in helping us to understand what is happening in education. But some of those things that are taking place like now is under the GPS project in the OECD, the Global Positioning System, where you can basically use the big data in your own country and try to see where you are in, as the OECD says, in the grid, in the geographic grid of education. And what do you need to do? What are the policy solutions to move forward? This is again a kind of a promise of big data to move you forward. I was in a conference a couple of months ago where somebody was speaking, giving a presentation about the future of education, and one of the main arguments was that in the future the schools will gradually disappear, but education will not, because the education, what the teachers and schools are doing, will be gradually replaced by smart machines. Just think about it. I disagree with that thing. I think it's not going to happen very quickly, but it's an argument that is going to be around more and more when we are in meetings like this. Now, one thing that we need to really pay attention to, and this is probably one of the first of those things as educators, when we think about big data and all these solutions that come with it, is to make a distinction between correlation and causation. You know, data mining and learning analytics, what these algorithms often do is to try to identify correlations. In other words, whether the events and things are occurring, happening at the same time or not, and whether there's some type of relationship over there. I'm going to show you this. Some people have seen this already, but this is one of my favorite correlation causation examples, and it's a very important one as well. And it comes from the OECD PISA data, and this is something that we couldn't really do and talk about without having this international comparative information available. So what I'm showing you here is basically the question that is there any connection between educational excellence or quality of learning outcomes and the equity, the fairness of the education system, right? So you see the equity here on the horizontal line, and when we move from left to right over there, it means that the systems of education become more equitable. I'm going to show you a number of education systems here, and the further right you are over there, the more equity there is within the system, meaning that those education systems are able to cope and deal with the inequalities that children bring to school every day, okay? So everybody would like to be there, right? Because it means that anybody can be successful. Your family background does not explain that much of the school success. And when you go up in the chart, it means that the learning outcomes in reading, math, and science that is measured is going to be better, right? So this is the average of these two variables that we are examining here, whether there's any type of relationship with the equity and quality. And once again, just to make sure that everybody is on board with this, if your country is here in this red area, it means that you have a double trouble. So in your system, you have lower than average learning outcomes, and you have less equity than other countries on average, right? If you're there, it means that your learning outcomes are better than average, but you have an issue with equity. There we have education systems where they are equitable but lower quality, and this green zone is, of course, where anybody in this room or any minister, any leader would like to see her or his education system being. Strong equity, schools are dealing and coping with with all types of different children's with their backgrounds, and kids are doing well in reading, math, and science. Okay? Let me take this away and show you some. This is not the most recent data. This is the numbers from 2012 PISA and what the OECD PISA can do. And this is quite interesting, actually. So we are in the Netherlands. You know, the Netherlands is almost like Canada in many ways. This country is doing amazingly well, given that the big part of the population in this country live under the sea level. In most other countries, if you're under sea level, you're dead. But in Netherlands, many things are doing very, very well, particularly when it comes to children, their health and well-being and education, many other things. So this is where the Netherlands is in this map. So this country is one of those examples where the equity and quality meet simultaneously. This is the United States, this is UK, Australia. So if you are English-speaking nation, you are doomed to be an average educationally. So learn another language, folks. Learn another language. Like somebody asked me that, how do you call the person who speaks 2 languages? And I said it must be a bilingual. How about somebody who only speaks 1 language? I said, I have no idea. The answer was American. Anyway, so this is Canada. And look at Canada. Canada is a kind of a combination of all the provinces and territories that take part in this study. Canada is doing extremely well. That's why people often say that we need more Canada. When you listen to Maggie, you heard that there are many things in Canada and any country that needs to be improved and done better. But I think Canada, for me, represents something that is a very unique and a good example when it comes to education. I often say that Canada is doing so well in education that Canada is in heaven. Maggie may disagree with me a little bit with this, but for me as a Finn who lives in the same type of latitude in the world, Canada represents a heaven. Here are these other countries, South Korea, Japan, Finland, Estonia, and then the other OECD countries that take part in this well-known program for international student assessment. And you will see something interesting. I'm not going to go into the details here, but you will see if you have done your statistics at some point of your life in school or college or university, you will see that there's a correlation there, right? That these flags, these countries are not, all over the place, but they seem to be somehow, around the line. That is not line here. Actually, this is it's like a zigzag, because I was thinking that it's more like a stairway to heaven. You remember this song? It goes something like this.
There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying the stairway to heaven.
But we need to remember that this is. We don't know anything about how the equity and quality here are related. We only know that they seem to happen simultaneously in many of these countries, but we do not know whether there's a relationship between those 2 things that would be a causal, whether quality of education, learning outcomes would actually cause the equity or other way around. We don't know that. Often people don't realize that. They just move forward with the correlations, and that's where the mistakes take place. Some of those countries that we often envy, the Southeast Asian education systems, our cities, are over there. And now let me pay a final tribute to the Netherlands. The Netherlands is doing very well in education. The Dutch are just on the top of the stairway, right? And I do a lot of work here in the Netherlands. Somebody, when I was showing this to principals and teachers, they said that, so are you telling me that the Dutch are so close to heaven that they are knocking on heaven's door? And I got this idea that this is great, because I really love music, and I think we all love music, right? So that's why I'm going to ask you to join me singing, knocking on heaven's door, okay? Are you ready for that? Because I want to hear how you sing. So you have a chance to do it 4 times.
I feel I'm knocking on
Now get ready.
door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
Louder. You can do much better than this. Wow. I love you, people. I really love you. Okay, so remember the stairway to heaven, but also keep in mind that this big data we see here only gives us correlation in this stuff. We don't know anything else. If you're not careful with the causal and correlational relationship, you can also conclude, like the economist did a year ago, is that if you eat more ice cream, it will improve your PISA results, right? because there is a correlation between ice cream consumption and how well children do in the OECD PISA study. So just give them more ice cream and things will improve. We need to be careful. So few words about small data, and then I'm going to close what I have to say. Because I think that my view is that, first of all, there's nothing new in small data when it comes to education, the work of teachers. We have always done that. But we need to create a narrative so that we can use the language and explain what small data is and why it's equally important, or maybe even more important than big data in helping schools and teachers to do what they are supposed to do. So that's why we need to be kind of a little bit more precise what we are talking about. So the small data is not as a term, it's not very old. It was probably made most well known by the Danish management consultant and expert called Martin Lindström. He wrote a book about a year ago called Small Data. It's a nice little book about what the small data does and is in business, in the world of business. Very nice examples of how big data often fails businesses and management. So Lindström says that small data is basically about tiny clues. There often these clues are hidden in the real life that can reveal and lead to big change. Okay, the big data book is full of these examples. But in the life of schools, this means that we have a lot of things in our classrooms and schools and communities that the big data measurements, whether it's a standardized test or survey or whatever it is, will never be able to reveal. And therefore, we have to have a different type of perspective, a point of view to things in our classrooms. I think that more we rely on big data measurements, the tests and other things, the more difficult it will be to really understand and see those tiny little clues in our schools. And therefore, that's why it's a particularly important. I had people often ask me that, what does the small data look like? To give me an example, what is a good kind of an illustration of the small data? This picture is from one of the schools in northwestern part of New South Wales in Australia. And this gentleman in the middle there was a former Minister of Education there called Adrian Piccoli. And he took me to a trip in his province for a week to see what the schools are doing. And when he went to the school, this is what he always did. The first thing, he went to sit with the kids. In this time, he's sitting there in the middle of the kids on the floor, and he wanted to be part of the learning community in the classroom. And he often spent the whole class, like 45 minutes, just to try to understand what the kids are saying, how they feel, what they do when they are learning things. And he did this in every school, in every classroom for a week. And I asked him that, how much of your time do you spend to do that? And he said, about one third of my entire working time, I do exactly this thing. And then I realized that I said to Adrian, this for me is a perfect example what the small data looks like. It's something that you have to be part of and listen and feel what is going on. And so Adrian is is probably one of the best examples of small data leaders for me. Now, at the time when I was in Australia a few months ago, in the fall, there was an article in a newspaper about how small data is coming to the healthcare also in Australia, exactly for the same reasons that big data is often failing to understand and predict what's going on in people's health, that we need another approach. And healthcare people have the same challenge that we educators, that the big data and smart machines are taking over the work of the nurses and doctors, and they're using algorithms to try to understand what is the best way to keep your health. Okay, so we need to also communicate very clearly that if we want to understand causal relationships in our schools and classrooms, in other words, whether something is affecting or causing better learning or worse learning, we need small data for that. Big data is not going to do that, and that's one of the most powerful arguments that we could have. That if we want to understand what works in school, we need small data. Big data is not going to be helpful for that. So I have an example from my own work. I used to teach math and science for many years. And one of the questions I had early on when I was a young teacher of mathematics in the middle school, because I loved mathematics. But I couldn't understand why everybody else, why those kids who were 11 and 12, why they didn't see mathematics in the same way as I did. Actually, most of my students, they hated mathematics. They were afraid of math, and I never could understand why it happened. And I can tell you one thing, that it doesn't matter how much big data you have, how much you test and measure these kids, it doesn't help you to understand this question, why children don't like mathematics, why they are afraid of it, why they are not interested in doing mathematics. Now, how many of you, raise your hand if you like mathematics? Good. Oh, wonderful. Raise your hand if you think that you are good in mathematics. The same people. It should be same people, right? Okay. Now, the good news is that I'm going to do a test for you. It's a very simple, it's a test that I normally do with my 6th graders back home. So kids who are about 12. Okay? Are you ready for this? It's a very simple thing. What you need to do is, I'm going to show you some numbers here. And you can do this even, if you have a translation. This is going to be a very simple English, so you can join us. So you're going to see numbers here. When you see the first number appearing here, the only thing you need to do is to shout it out. Okay? Shout the number out as loudly as you can. Are you with me? Can you hear me? Okay, so shout it out. When you see another number appearing here, you add that number to the previous one. Okay? You add that number to what you said previously. And then when you see the third number, now it's getting complicated, third number appearing, you add that third number to what you just said before. And if everything goes fine, around 2:30 we should be done. Are you ready? No, are you ready? Yes. Okay, let's see how this goes. 1, 2, 3, and loudly. No. Is this a chapel? Or the classroom? Now think about it. You are supporting your ice hockey team, Phil, or football team, or whatever your sport is, and your team is just a tiny little bit behind. And your team is begging for your support. Okay? So this is how seriously you have to take this. Okay? Don't be afraid of shouting loudly, everybody. Even if you're a Spanish speaker or French or whatever you are, just you can use your own language. Okay? Are you ready? No, I said, are you ready? Yes. 1, 2, 3, loudly. Louder. Louder. All right. Okay, let me ask you once again, how many of you are good in mathematics? 3 people, very good. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna, you don't need to take a picture of this, I'll tweet this for you, this page, so you can take your smartphone and do your mathematics. But I heard many people saying 5,000, so that's fine. It's okay, it's good to make mistakes. Are you ready? Can I move to the next one, or you're still calculating? Okay. Now, let me get back to this question of why some children find it difficult to learn mathematics, and what has been a kind of one of the biggest small data understandings or experiences in my own life as a teacher. I started to think about questions like, what do my students think when they think about mathematics? Or even more, what do they think? What do they see when they think about a mathematician at work? Right? What does it look like when a mathematician is at work? So I started to collect data. And this is the only only way to do that is to use a small data methods. Go to the children and ask them to, talk about it or write about it. But what I asked them to do systematically always, when I had a new class of kids, is I asked them to draw a picture, an image of a mathematician. That's a small data method. So I asked these kids, who were normally about 12 or 13 years old, to draw me a picture in the class of a mathematician. And then I collected their pictures and often illustrations and descriptions, and I tried to understand what are these children thinking when they are thinking about a mathematician or mathematics. And this was the turning point in my life as a teacher of mathematics, because I understood that if the images are not compatible with the reality, we have a problem there. I'm going to show you one. This is just one example. I collected thousands of illustrations for research purposes, and we published a book about this about 15 years ago, where we asked children in different countries to do exactly the same thing. And this is a very common. There were many illustrations like this, but this includes many of those things. So this was a 11 years old boy who drew this image of a mathematician. Just look at this. Untidy, hair is all over the place, there are holes in the pants are too short, and all sorts of other things. And the same guy, same person, same student, gave a kind of a description that is something like this, that mathematician is usually a fat male, okay? Unstylish. No friends except other mathematicians. No romantic relationships or social life at all. Wrinkles in their forehead because they have been thinking so hard, okay? And very short tempers. So this was a small data that I was collecting every year from my students. And I understood very quickly that if somebody really thinks and believes that this is what mathematicians are, this is what they do, there's no way that this person is going to be a mathematician. Or, in many cases, there's no way that this child will be even interested in things like mathematics. So what the small data can do here is to help us to understand this tiny little clue that in this case was the belief of the child or pupil of what mathematician is and what mathematicians do. And that helped me to try to change these beliefs and images actively. For example, showing what mathematicians do for life. I often brought a female mathematician in my class from the insurance company or somewhere else to show and tell these kids what she is doing. That changes everything. The whole idea of what mathematics is all about. So for me, this is a very good, important example of small data. There are many others, but let's move to the close. So what do we do? What could we do next? I have three things for you. First is that I think, and you are very important people, just like Maggie was saying, that you are the people who can make things change and move. So I have three things for you. One is that I think we could actively talk about small data as not as a kind of a replacement of big data, but something that we need also together with the big data that will help in many cases, not always, but in many cases it's helpful, but we need to understand the limits. But something we need as teachers and as a profession is small data. And some of those things, I show these very quickly because these are obvious things for you that we can use as a building this narrative is that we just show what are the difference, how these two things are different, small data and big data. It's about the size, it's about who is handling, who is responsible for doing these things. It's about correlations and causations, be very clear about that. Big data is often using schools as objects where the data is collected. For small data, schools are doing that and teachers are collecting this data. Big data is about algorithms and analytics, as I said earlier. Small data is about collective human judgment that teachers and people do collectively together. And big data is often about trying to see what happens next. And small data, in this case, for example, is to understand what is happening right now. So these are the things that we could use as a basis for illustration. Then the other one, of course, is to begin to use small data more actively in teachers' work. And there are many things. One of the best ways that teachers can do to emphasize the importance of small data in their work is to use more authentic assessments in their work. The things that we used to do 20 years or 30 years ago. I saw a statistics from the United States that shows that 1/3 of the teachers' time today in American schools goes to somehow, one way or the other, to data. It's about testing, it's about meetings, data meetings, or it's often about meetings about data meetings. So teachers use a lot of time on this kind of a data type of thing, and we need to make sure that teachers have time to get back to the authentic assessments, portfolios, formative assessments, and all those tools that are actually small data facilities. Be aware of the tiny little details. This is another, it's more about changing the mindset. If you're an education leader, do what Adrian is doing. Go and sit with the teachers and students and try to understand these tiny little things that you often ignore if you have a kind of a big data classes on your eyes. And enhance collaborative practices in schools. Conversation is often the best way to have small data at your disposal in schools and districts. Make sure that you have time to engage in conversations. And finally, lastly, this is something I have used for a while now when thinking and talking about the small data, is that one thing is for sure, and it is going to happen. Just going back to this Intel and Ed companies' ideas, that if you don't lead with small data, somebody will lead you by big data. It's as simple like this. So if we just keep on ignoring this thing, the big data, unfortunately, is going to be winner in the end. But I think we have a power to change the conversation and bring a new narrative that is the power of small data. Thank you very much.